All right, we are live from the Empowered Mom Studios, and I just got off my call with Donald. He goes live every Thursday to a select group of us, and he sometimes puts the videos on his YouTube channel, sometimes not. Usually, you gotta come in and play big, and if you miss out, you miss out. And I highly value these calls, so I always prioritize them because after learning everything I possibly can from him, I've just learned that he is just the master. And I knew it. I knew it from the beginning. And the thing is that there is a certain time frame where you can start to know if somebody is for real or if they're just trying to take advantage of you or they're not really it. They're not the person for you in mentorship, in friendship. And it all comes down to fairy tales. Are you intrigued? I thought so. Fairy tales can tell us a lot about success. In fact, when you take apart the bones of those fairy tales and really dive deep and look at them, you'll start to see the magic. There's a book I love to read, and I pull it out every couple of years. It's called Women Who Run with the Wolves. And there's a lot of folk and fairy tales mixed in with the teachings. It's a very deeply spiritual book. Highly recommend it, especially if you are a woman and you are on a spiritual path or you're thinking things in your life aren't working. When I picked up this book the first time at 19, I didn't read it at the level that I really needed to. I mean, I was 19. I didn't know nothing about life. Like it was ridiculous how much I did not know. And at the same time, I found this fascinating because I've always loved fairy tales. I've always felt that there was a magic to fairy tales. However, when you're a kid and living in a certain time back in the 90s where people started cleaning up the fairy tales and not even Disneyfying them, but completely sanitizing them of anything that could possibly be misconstrued or anything that might upset children, or more likely the helicopter parents who are precious snowflakes in a way because they can't possibly have the wolf eat Little Red Riding Hood. They can't possibly have the witch kill someone. They have to sanitize everything. And when you do that, when you sanitize, you lose the magic and the wisdom. Take, for example, Snow White. Now, you might be familiar with this story, the Disneyfied version, where Snow White is in the forest with the dwarves, and then the witch comes, the queen disguised as the witch comes in with an apple. And then Snow White falls down and she's awakened by true love's kiss. But that is not the story of Snow White. In fact, there are many times where Snow White is, well, she's very, very naive and way too trusting for her own good. And the dwarves warn her several times, and she still falls for it. And this comes into the rule of three. Sometimes you have to learn the lesson three times before you truly get that maybe you should stop doing that thing. And in the case of Snow White, the witch, the queen, whatever you want to call her, I mean, she did have some sort of black magic. They referenced that. She attempts to kill Snow White, first of all, with tightening the bodice. So she comes in as a peddler woman disguised, and she's got these laces. And she's like, "Oh, let me in and I will fix your bodice for you properly." And Snow White, of course, is tempted because she's probably like, "I'm growing and I don't have anybody to help me with my laces." And obviously, the dwarves, they're men, they don't know anything about fashion. But this woman is coming in and she's allowing me to look pretty. So, yeah, sure, I'll let her in. Well, corsets and bodices if you tighten the laces too much, eventually you can't breathe. I mean, you see it in all the movies, the period movies where the women are like, oh, I'm going to faint. Well, that's because their organs were literally squished. So in the tale, the queen tightens the bodice to the point where Snow White can't breathe and she faints. And the dwarfs come home and they see this and they had warned her not to let anybody in the house, but Snow White didn't listen because she's a teenager and teenagers, you know how it is. So they cut the laces and Snow White is suddenly able to breathe. Yay, she's saved. And they say, hey, that was the Wicked Queen. Don't let anybody in the house. And Snow White's like, oh, okay, I won't. But then another disguised peddler woman, queen, shows up. She's like, well, the laces didn't work. This time I'm going to poison her and I'm going to use a comb. Because one of the things back in medieval society is that they would have poison on objects if they wanted to kill somebody. In fact, there was sometimes they would poison clothing, they would poison combs, and to be honest, they were poisoning themselves anyway with their lead paint and their dyes that they had on clothing. In fact, there was a shade of green that was very popular in Victorian times that was literally, I think it was arsenic or cyanide. It was one of the two, but it was on their wallpaper. And we wonder why people didn't live very long. They're painting their walls poison, and it's fashionable. So, of course, the queen shows up with this comb, and it's a poison comb. And she's like, let me comb your hair. And she puts the comb in Snow White's hair, and she falls down, dead. Well, this time the dwarves come home just in time, and they pull the comb, and they're like, okay, again, the queen tried to kill you. Maybe you shouldn't open the door. Maybe you should stop letting the queen in. She is trying to kill you. No, it is not some benevolent peddler woman giving you gifts. It is someone who is here to destroy you. And they're doing it through kindness or pretend kindness. They're being fake with you. And you are falling for it. And Snow White's like, okay, I won't let anybody in. Ah, but the queen goes to her magic mirror, and this is the part where we know, which is the apple, but there's also another piece to that too. Because, you know, when somebody really wants to get you for their own desire to have everything, they are going to trick you in every insidious way that they possibly can. And they'll even make it look like they're doing the same thing and it's not hurting them. So guess what? So what happens is the queen takes an apple and it's actually white on one side, which I guess it's not juicy. And then the other side is red. And the red side of the apple has all of the poison in it. And the white side, she puts a worm. In some of the versions of the tale, she puts a worm. And I remember this because there was also, they had a musical of Snow White. I think they had it on the Disney Channel way back when I was a kid. And I loved that musical and I can't find it. It was done in the 80s and they had all the songs and I just love musicals. So if I can ever find it again, I will buy it just so I can watch it again. But anyway, in this tale, she's got the worm on one side and juicy apple on the other side. And she's the nice, kind old lady peddler woman. And she comes up. She's not a scary witch in the actual tale. She's a nice, kindly old peddler woman. And she's like, oh, my dear, but wouldn't you just love to have one of these apples? She's like, I dare not open the door. I cannot risk it. But she was so tempted. It was such a juicy looking apple. I mean, it was just so succulent. And probably back then, when fruit was like harder to come by, to see something so rich and delicious, it would be tempting. And she's like, you know, I really want it, but I can't. The peddler woman is like, oh, do you think that it would be poisoned? Nonsense, dear. Here, I'll cut it in half. You can take the juicy half, and I'll take the white half. And Snow White's a little clever, and she's like, I don't know. How about I take the white half? And then she takes the white half, and of course it's got the worm. It's like, oh, there's a worm in here. It's like, oh, it's just a little worm. Here, I'll take that half. Here, dear, you can have the red half. Oh, okay. She takes it, and she's poisoned. And the apple's still in her throat, by the way. Like she doesn't actually swallow it. That's important. So then the queen is like, now I'm the fairest in the land, and I win. And she goes off on her way because she's like, now they won't be able to find what poisoned her. So dwarves come home, they look for laces, they can't find any, and they can't find a comb. And they're like, I guess she's really dead. And they put her in the glass coffin. And they're watching her. And then the prince rides by and he sees this beautiful maiden and he doesn't kiss her. He's like, I just want to be able to look at her for, I don't know. I don't know. He instantly fell in love with her, her beauty or something. He's like, just let me take her. And they're like, okay, fine. And then as he's riding away with this casket, suddenly the apple flies from her mouth because from the jolting of the ride. And she wakes up. And then he's like, I want to marry you. And she's like, okay. And they go back to the castle. But the best part is the queen is invited to the wedding. I'm a Scorpio. I do like justice. And this is a little gruesome. But when the queen arrives and she realizes because the mirror had told her that the bride is the fairest, and she gets there, and guess who's waiting for her with a pair of hot iron shoes straight from the fires that the queen then has to put on. And the idea is she basically has to dance until she's dead. Now, I mean, it's a medieval fairy tale and they were really into torture. I don't know where the heck they came up with that, but they thought that that was, there might have been some elements of the faith or something that came through where, I mean, they would burn witches and they would burn heretics. So that might have been the cautionary tale of vanity. But at the same time, you see the underlying message. If you've been burned once, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But if you keep going back, it's just going to be worse. And this ties into relationships. This ties into friendships. This ties into if you're like, oh, I'm going to buy this thing and that will solve my problem. Oh, well, I didn't pay enough, so maybe I'll buy this one instead. And doesn't solve the problem. Okay, well, now I'll buy the most expensive thing to solve my problem because they say that that's the real thing because they always hold a piece missing to the puzzle. Guess what? They were leading you down that path to getting the most expensive thing. Now, there are certain systems in our society, I won't name them, but people who happen to know the work I do, I mean, it's obvious, it's behind me. They know where this is going. Sometimes the thing, the lower level thing, and you're told that will solve all your problems, leads to a bigger problem later, the thing that they were really trying to sell you in the first place. And obviously, I'll have to do a different video for my business on this exact topic, but I've also written it in my free newsletter and I put it out in freebies. Because the thing about truth is that you don't hold anything back. You don't hide the magic. It's right in front of you. All you have to do is read between the lines. And this ties in to the second part of the rule of three, where you're getting the ultimate treasure. And I have another video where I talked about the magic beans and how a lot of people would overlook those beans, but Jack planted the beans. He got the beanstalk. Instead of just harvesting the beans and being like, cool, we're fed, he climbed up the beanstalk and then he saw a castle and he's like, oh, a castle. Maybe I'll go inside. And he saw that there was gold and he took a little bit. But then he came back and he took the golden goose. And then he came back again and he took the harp. And then the giant chased him. And then he's like, okay, well, there's a giant obstacle in the way of my treasure. And later he finds out that he was actually the true heir of that castle. It's like that was all his treasure. So giant's gone. He fought it. Now, somebody who goes in and gets that little bit of treasure might be like, okay, cool, we've got the treasure and we don't need to do anything else. We're good with that. We're good with that little bit of gold. That's all we needed. And there's a giant, so I'm not even going to touch that one. Like, no, I'm just going to stay over here and be content. But that whole freaking castle is actually yours. So with the rule of 3 again, it can take 3 days of trying something. It can take 3 weeks. It can take 3 months. It can even take 3 years. And when you are on that path, you will know instinctively whether you are dealing with the wicked queen or if you are climbing up and defeating the giant and about to get the castle. So within the rule of 3 of fairy tales, what you need to be clear of is the evidence. In Snow White's case, she let the peddler woman in, and the peddler woman turned out to be the queen who tried to kill her. And she probably could have just stopped, but she's like, no, I'm gonna wait and I'm gonna see. And oh, I got tricked again. And then she gets tricked for a third time. However, it wasn't the full story, because in the end, even with all of those obstacles in her path, even with getting tricked, she found the magic. She learned. She is the rightful princess. Her stepmother stole the kingdom. So she is now married to the prince, and they're now king and queen, and she's got her kingdom. He's got his. They needed to get rid of the old queen. She doesn't exist no more. She needed to be executed because that's how they got rid of royalty back then. It's not like they would have said, okay, bye, see ya. It was nice that while you were serving. No, that queen would have come back and tried to take over the kingdom again. I mean, Once Upon a Time even showed that. It's like Snow took back her kingdom. And then, of course, Regina comes in. But of course, like, I love that show because Regina is redeemed. But the fact is like, some people can't be redeemed. Some people really are trying to destroy you. And that is when you need to unleash the darkness. But you don't start with the darkness. It's only when it's necessary. As women, we are tied to life and death. And as a Scorpio, I embody both life and death. So I can recognize that. And I also studied fairy tales in college. It was really fun because I got to go in and study children's literature, and I love the fairy tales and the rule of 3. So in one aspect, you get screwed over 3 times, but in the end, that's what you needed as a lesson to claim your ultimate treasure in your kingdom. And on the other hand, you go and you take this obscure thing that you didn't really think was gold, and you just say, I'm going to try something. Oh, look, now there's a beanstalk. Huh. Okay, well, I'm going to climb up. Oh, there's treasure up here. Oh, but there's also a giant. But I wonder, if I get this, okay, now I'm going to come back and I'm going to go at a higher level. Okay, I got even more treasure. Okay, now I'm going to go for another high level. Oh, but this one's scary. This one's got something coming after me now. Oh no, oh no. But this is so precious to me that I'm not letting go of it. And I'm going to fight that giant and I'm going to reclaim my kingdom. So when you take these two examples, what you're really looking is like the keys to success will either come from your failures and your lessons or from you trying something and keep going. And again, you'll usually find it within 3 days of giving it a little bit, 3 weeks, giving it a little bit more effort. If you want something bigger than that, it might take you 3 months to get the data to keep going. But if you are looking for a giant reward of a kingdom, then you need to continue to be paying attention to the data and not paying attention to whether you're getting the results right away. Because big things, especially things meant for you, especially your kingdom meant for you, that is going to take dedication. And that is how I know that everything that I want is going to come true. It's all going to happen because I've noticed the rule of 3. I've noticed when I do something for 3 days and then I take a break and then suddenly something magical comes in that's confirmation that yes, what I was doing is working. I've noticed that when I do something for 3 weeks, I get the data and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's working. This might need to be tweaked a little bit, but yeah, I can see the path now. I try something for 3 months. I get more confirmation that it's for me. And then the 3 years, well, I'm in my 3 years. 3 years have passed. And even though I have put in a lot of effort that a lot of people would have been like, why don't you just give up? I mean, people have even said that to me. I'm like, oh, but you don't know. You don't actually know because you can't feel it. But I actually have some confirmation. And yeah, no, I don't have everything yet. That's true. However, in the connections that I've made in my business world and in my personal life and the friendships and the clients that I've had, the data that I've collected from those clients, the success stories that I've created within the last 3 years, especially, I know. And I refine everything. So I'm okay with waiting. I'm okay with fighting giants. If that wicked queen comes in and tricks me, fine. But I am a Scorpio. So I will learn. I will see. I will know exactly how to play it. And I will make sure that justice is done. Because I know the rule of 3. And now you know the rule of 3 too. And you can go out into your own life and you can ask yourself the questions like, what have I been working on for the last 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years that I think isn't working and that I'm never going to get it? However, there are little tiny hints, pieces of data that still tells me I'm on the right path. And maybe I just need to either play at a higher level, take action, and go for it and face my fear, get some help and support, maybe someone who has an insight and knows exactly where the path is and knows who else you might need to be in connection with to find it, and keep going. Because sometimes when a door is blocked or an obstacle is in your path, there is a way around it. And you find that way, you find those people, you get your in. And It's that simple. We all need each other. We are all connected. We all have things to contribute. Those dwarves saved Snow White twice. And the third time, they thought they couldn't save her. But then it turns out that the prince, that obviously was her true love and meant to be with her, because he gazed upon her and he's like, that is the one. And I don't care if she's dead. I'm going to take her back because I cannot bear the thought of not looking upon her because of just how much light she fills my life with just in this moment. And she doesn't even have to say anything. Yeah. Suddenly that apple fell from her mouth. She woke up. Now they're ruling a kingdom together. Actually, technically two kingdoms. He didn't just get some maiden in the forest in a casket. He got a princess with a kingdom. Pretty powerful, hey? So if you loved this, if you want more on my insights on fairy tales, this is something that I absolutely love. I'm also into pop culture. I'm into movies. I see the things that a lot of people overlook. As a reflector, I'm also able to notice a lot of patterns, and this just lights me up. I mean, it's fun. I enjoy it. I I make no money on this at all. Like this is just my thing. So if you love this, just share it. And I mean, if you are in the birth community, you can always check out my other channel too, because I have a free path. I believe that information needs to be out there. Can't have it behind closed doors. Because if you have the information behind closed doors and nobody can access it, and they don't get all the pieces to put it together themselves, then a lot of people get tricked by the Wicked Queen. And a lot of people get scared off by the giant and they don't go for what's theirs. So I aim to change that because a drop in the ocean creates ripples. Many ripples create waves, and enough waves change the tide. And I don't know what it is about this era, but ever since 2020, it seems like things have really been accelerated, don't you think? A lot of shifts have been happening, a lot of interesting developments, magic even has started to surface. There's a lot of fear too. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of darkness. But, darkness is not without the light. It's all shades of gray. So if you do find these helpful, I do encourage you to like, to share, to comment even. Because, if you comment, you can share your own insights and put that light out there, and then others can see it and benefit from it because you're a drop in the ocean too. You can create ripples. And if you create the ripples in the right spots, you can create waves with others, and we can change the tide. Rule of 3. I found my path. You ready to find yours? Now I'm going to go and read the rest of an awesome book that I picked up. I'm going to be talking to the author next week, and I'm really excited. I'm just going to show it quickly. As I said, it's for my business. Because the thing is that it's one thing to read a book. It's one thing to get a course. It's one thing to follow somebody's content. But when you actually get to talk to the person who wrote that or created that, that is another level. It's an expensive level and it's not accessible to everyone, of course. And at the same time, when you value that level and you put the time in, well, who knows what's going to develop? Just reading her book is getting me excited because there's so many things now. It's like, I know exactly what chapter I'm going to be discussing on a little project. I'll just announce it now. I'm going to be creating a podcast. I don't know when. It will probably be a video podcast first, and then I'll do the audio later because There's just something about video where you can see people interact and see how they light up that just, it has another level to it. So, I mean, people can still listen to things even on YouTube, even if they can't see the video, but I'm going to have mine on video and it will be on my YouTube channel. And it's going to be with a friend of mine who we always get into really good conversations. And we're going to discuss books because we both love books. We bonded over books. And you know what? When you're creating anything, do it from a place of absolute love and light. And you're going to find within 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, who your audience is and who loves it. I guarantee you. Sometimes it can even be in 3 hours. So go create, go try out your rule of 3. And if you're inclined, put in the comments how it worked out for you or what you've noticed, because wisdom comes from multiple perspectives. All right. I love you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye now.